Imagine you are 14 years old. You are in a strange country, surrounded by people who despise you. It is your wedding night, and the King of France, your new father-in-law, is in the room. He is not just here to wish you well. He is here, along with the entire leering, whispering royal court, to watch you and your 14-year-old husband consummate the marriage. This is not a secret, brutal ritual. This is public policy. This is a state-sanctioned public humiliation. For Catherine de' Medici, this night wasn't the end of her suffering. It was the beginning. She had just entered a world that would spend the next 10 years systematically trying to break her, and when it was done, it wouldn't have broken her. It would have created a monster. When Catherine de' Medici arrived in France in 1533, she was already on hostile ground. The refined ancient French court looked at her with contempt. She wasn't one of them. She was the Italian shopkeeper's daughter. Her family, the Medici, were new money. Wealthy bankers who had bought their titles, not inherited them through glorious conquest. She was small. She was plain, and she had one single, solitary job to provide an heir to the French throne, and for 10 years, she failed. 1 year passed. No child. 2 years, 5, 10 years. An entire decade of public, catastrophic, humiliating failure. Every month was a fresh wave of shame. Her husband, Prince Henry, didn't care. He was completely and utterly obsessed with his mistress, Diane de Poitiers, a woman 20 years older than him, 20 years older than Catherine. Diane was the real queen in everything but name. She wore the crown jewels. She advised Henry on matters of state. She was beautiful, confident, and powerful, and she ruled Catherine's life with an iron fist. This was the true humiliation. Not a single night of cruelty, but a 10-year public spectacle of her own worthlessness. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If she remained barren, she would be repudiated, annulled, divorced, and sent back to Italy in disgrace. Her life over, a failure. The court openly called for her to be replaced. So began a decade of nightmarish medical torture. Desperate to conceive, Catherine submitted to everything. Court physicians, steeped in superstition, prescribed grotesque fertility treatments. She was forced to drink mule's urine and foul-tasting herbal concoctions. She had to place poultices of cow dung and deer antlers on her abdomen, all in a desperate bid to do the one thing the kingdom demanded of her. Her father-in-law, the king, was so desperate for a grandson he even suggested that other men should try to impregnate her, just to see if she was in fact the problem. But the most cutting, daily humiliation came from her rival. Diane de Poitiers wasn't just the mistress. She was the master. According to court whispers, Diane, who had already given her own husband children, took it upon herself to coach the royal couple. She would allegedly summon Catherine and Henry to the bedroom, instruct them on how to perform, and send them off to do their duty for France. Imagine that. The woman your husband loves, the most powerful woman at court, directing your most private, intimate moments as a test of your basic utility. Catherine had no power, no allies, no friends. All she could do was survive. She learned to smile at her enemies. She learned to be invisible. She learned to be patient. She learned to wait. And then, after 10 agonizing years, the nightmare ended. Catherine gave birth to a son, and then another, and another, and another. In total, she would have 10 children. The barren wife was gone. She was now the mother of kings. She was no longer disposable. The court that had mocked her now had to respect her, and they certainly had to fear her. Her position was, at last, secure. In 1547, her husband, Henry II, became king. Diane de Poitiers still ruled him. She was still the power at court. But Catherine's role was cemented. She was the queen. She was the mother of the next king. She continued to wait, and then, in 1559, fate, or perhaps God, gave her the ultimate gift. At a grand jousting tournament, King Henry rode against a young captain. A splinter from the captain's broken lance pierced the king's helmet, slid under the visor, and plunged directly into his eye, driving wood shards deep into his brain. He didn't die. Not yet. For 10 excruciating days, he lay in agony. The best surgeons in Europe tried to save him. They even beheaded 4 criminals and replicated the wound on their severed heads, probing the skulls to see if they could save the king. But it was no use. Catherine watched over him. And on the 10th day, he died. Catherine de' Medici, the woman they called the shopkeeper's daughter, the barren wife, was now a widow. And more importantly, she was the queen regent of France. She was, at 40 years old, in absolute control. Her first act as widow? She didn't need poison. She didn't need a secret plot. She simply sent a letter. She immediately banished Diane de Poitiers from court. She forced her, by royal decree, to return every last one of the priceless crown jewels Henry had given her. And then, the final, perfect, cold-blooded revenge. She confiscated Chenonceau, the magnificent, beautiful castle Henry had built for Diane, and forced her to trade it for a gloomy, inferior castle far from the center of power. It was a cold, legal, and total humiliation. Catherine was finally in charge. Her 14-year-old son, Francis II, was now king. But he was sick and weak, and she was the power behind the throne. When he died a year later, her next son, Charles IX, became king at age 10. Catherine de' Medici was officially and unassailably the ruler of France. The woman who had been publicly worthless for a decade now held the fate of a nation in her hands. But the France she inherited was a powder keg. A brutal religious war was raging between the Catholics and the Protestants, known as the Huguenots. Catherine, a woman whose entire life had been defined by a desperate, terrifying lack of control, was now obsessed with it. She tried to keep the peace, to play the two sides against each other. But the country was tearing itself apart. In 1572, she arranged a marriage between her daughter and a Protestant leader. A peace wedding. All the most powerful Protestant nobles gathered in Paris. But the city was a tinderbox of religious hatred. An assassination attempt on a Protestant leader failed. The city exploded. Catherine panicked, fearing a Protestant uprising, fearing a coup, fearing losing control. She and her council made a choice that would define her legacy forever. They decided to strike first. On August 24th, 1572, the church bells of Paris rang, the signal to begin. The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. This wasn't a rumor of poison. This was a state-sponsored slaughter. For 3 days, Catholic mobs, led by royal guards, hunted and murdered Protestants. Men, women, and children were dragged from their beds and butchered in the streets. The Seine River ran red with blood. The massacre spread to the rest of France. In total, as many as 70,000 people were killed. This was her real, dark legacy. Not a vial of red liquid from a secret diary, but a river of blood ordered by a public decree. There is no secret Vatican letter confessing to a few poisonings. The truth is so much worse. We don't need a hidden diary to know what Catherine was capable of. The proof is written in every history book of France. The 14-year-old girl who was systematically broken and humiliated by the French court learned her lessons well. She learned that cruelty was a tool. She learned that power was the only thing that kept you safe. The decade of humiliation didn't just make her a wife. It made her the Serpent Queen. But here is the ultimate tragic irony. Catherine de' Medici did all of this. She endured the humiliation, she seized the crown, she drenched a nation in blood, all to protect the power of her children and secure her family's dynasty, and she failed. One by one, all 3 of her sons who became king, just like her husband, died. Francis II died of sickness. Charles IX died of tuberculosis. Her favorite son, Henry III, was assassinated, and not one of them left an heir. The dynasty she had sacrificed her humanity for ended with her. Her bloodline was erased. The French crown passed to her distant cousin and rival, a Protestant she had tried to kill. That was the final cosmic revenge. Was Catherine a monster born of pure evil? Or was she a survivor, forged into a monster by a decade of unbearable cruelty? Tell me what you think in the comments. Script ends.